Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of The People's Report, News for the Left, brought to you by Solidarity TV. Today is November 19th, 2025. Today, I'm joined here with Austin. Did you know that a woman might be the next president of Chile? And she's a communist? Did you know that veganism can be a tick-borne illness? Is mass deportation putting you at risk to be human trafficked? Canada's giving land back to natives. What's that about? What's the bigger story? Jeffrey Epstein trafficking children? Or Bill Clinton murdering them? Who would you trust more to take care of your community? Your neighbors? Or the military of Azerbaijan? Why is a Baltimore prison executing people via dehydration? What do you stand to lose if the AI bubble pops? All these topics and more in tonight's episode of The People's Report. Timestamps are in the episode description.
Well, don't feel so devastated if you're feeling alienated, cause it turns out you're not alone. Just open up your heart, let the revolution start, and grab that megaphone. Solidarity, solidarity, I need you and you need me. Solidarity, 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 solidarity.
Communist Jeannette Jara, first in Chile's presidential election, heads to runoff November 17, 2025 via People's World. Chilean voters cast their ballots for president on Sunday, putting communist Jeannette Jara in first place with 27% in a multi-candidate race. She beat out the country's most infamous fascist son, José Antonio Cast, who captured 24%. The two will now advance to December 14th runoff, setting up a true class struggle for the presidency. Jara is a rare working-class candidate in a country where, for many decades, political leaders only hailed from the wealthy European-descended elite. She grew up in the northern Santiago's El Cortillo neighborhood in a house without running water. The daughter of a mechanic and a homemaker, she is the eldest of 5 children. Variously a farm worker, street food vendor, and product promoter in her younger days, Jara studied hard and eventually earned her law degree and a master's in public policy. Joining the communist youth of Chile at the age of 14, she made a name for herself as a leader in the fights to democratize the country after dictator Augusto Pinochet's fall in the 1990s, and eventually rose to become a government minister. Cast, her opponent, is part of the right-wing royalty of the Chilean ruling class. His parents were German immigrants who arrived in the early 1950s. His father, Michael Cast Schindel, was a member of Hitler's Nazi Party and a lieutenant in the military of the Third Reich. He escaped from U.S. custody and then fled to the denazification campaign in Germany after World War II. He settled in Chile where, together with other relatives, he set up a sausage factory that made the family one of the richest in the country. The fascist politics brought over from Europe were passed down through the generations. One of Cast's brothers, Miguel, was a Chicago boy economist and labor minister for Pinochet. He helped impose neoliberal policies that crushed the Chilean working class, with an emphasis on privatization, deregulation, and attacks on unions. While progressives and labor are celebrating Jara's first-place finish, apprehensions are high for the second round. That's because Cast is likely to pick up most of the votes that went to other right-wing candidates, a combination that makes him the favorite in a head-to-head matchup with Jara. The Communist Party of Chile, PCCH, was blunt in its assessment of the task ahead. These will be weeks of enormous challenge where, moreover, a profound responsibility falls on the democratic, progressive, and left-wing forces, who must once and for all set aside their squabbles and self-interest, put an end to friendly fire and distracting, confusing agendas, and work resolutely, without ambiguity or pettiness, for the victory of our joint candidate, which is the people's candidate. This is a decisive moment for unity. As Cast's platform and campaign make clear, the legacy of the fascist Pinochet dictatorship continues to haunt modern-day Chile. That's why Jara warns that the country stands at the precipice. When election results were announced Sunday night, she told the Chileans, "Democracy in our country must be taken care of and valued. Once lost, it costs us a lot to recover it, and today, it is once again at risk." Nazis in Chile. Who's surprised? I mean, after Pinochet, still kicking.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you really get to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah. So, for those who might not be as aware, on September 11th, 1973, the United States orchestrated the violent overthrow of the Chilean government, the democratically elected socialist government of Chile, which not only destroyed the government, but literally murdered the president, Salvador Allende, in his office. the famous photo of his very thick glasses snapped in half after he got shot, and installed the fascist dictator Augusto Pinochet, who ruled the country from 73 until, I think, 1990. So in a similar mirror almost to Franco, who got away with being a fascist for a very long time in Spain. So the country has, based on my understanding, I'm not an expert on Chile, has had a hard time recovering since then, and has been kind of fluctuating between wanting to be left and having all of these far-right institutions still in play.
Yeah.
But having a communist win an election, I mean, she won the primary, so we'll see how she does in the general. Now we know that she was basically the only left-wing candidate running amongst a handful of candidates who are mostly right-wing, and her new rival, won less of the vote than she did. But he could win potentially up to 70% of the public vote in the general election in just a few weeks. So some of her platform policies are really about tackling inequality and addressing the plundering of natural resources. So Chile is a really big producer and exporter of lithium and, I believe, copper. So she wants to create more or bigger state-controlled public entities that produce this, and so that way the people can benefit rather than private stockholders. There already is one for copper, and I believe she wants to create one at least for lithium as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cass seems to be a pretty standard right-wing guy. He is, he kind of has like a platform of like crime is caused by immigrants kind of a thing and foreigners. He's against abortion even in cases of rape. Just kind of like a shitty looking guy, you know, shitty. Actually, I don't know what he looks like. Shitty. Actually, I do know what he looks like. More of a shitty sounding guy. So let me correct that. Sorry. But yeah, I'm glad you provided that context for us. I think that September 11, 1973 is considered like, in some cases, the onset of the neoliberal era, because it was like a laboratory of the shock therapy program that we applied in other cases as well. So yeah, you know, the ascension of a communist in Chile is promising, I think, from our point of view. I know that now that the multiple right-wing candidates, all of the votes that they got can now go to cast, so that maybe doesn't bode so well for her, but yeah, standing here watching her with hope, at least.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing about Kast is that he is a big Trump guy. Mm-hmm. Like his rallies, people wear MAGA hats to his rallies, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't think of any, with the exception of the Nazi Party, I can't imagine any other political party having such, I don't want to say international appeal, but having such big international copycats.
They're like simping for MAGA. They're simping for the leader.
Mm-hmm. And for Trump, too, of all people. Like, I don't sympathize with it. I understand if you're in Oklahoma and you're trying to cater to the MAGA crowd, but if you're in Chile, let's be real, if you go there, you're going to get deported.
Yeah. Trump doesn't know that you exist. If you're in Chile, he doesn't know what Chile is.
He thinks it's the spicy
Yeah,
stuff
he thinks he had some last night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's interesting that, you know, in relation to that and deportation, I mean, he's copying the same thing, you know. I wonder where Chile thinks the criminal immigrants come from. Argentina, like, I guess that shares their largest border. I don't know. But, you know, Kast is European. His family's from Germany. They escaped denazification. They were wanted by the government for being literal Nazis. And in contrast...
They opened up a sausage factory.
Yeah. Which is, I wonder if it's like a chorizo or if it's like a German sausage. I don't know. Not buying any. No. Boycott Cast Company, or whatever it's called. German sausage by him. Yeah. But, you know, it's really interesting that racial hierarchy of you know, white Europeans and brown Hispanics, as we'll say, is still in play in South America. I know that's been the thing in Argentina for a while, and probably in other countries as well. But to see it so drastically, I mean, you have a Hispanic woman, working class communist, against the white bourgeois, literal Nazi, child of immigrants. So if we're going to talk about criminal immigrants coming to Chile, I can think of at least one right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So it's absurd, and it's it's a reflection that maybe the far right is not, well, it's not an intellectual movement, we know that, but it's not policy based but vibes based. Mm-hmm. And it's based on this like almost populism of, maybe not populism,
a reactionary populism, a pseudo-populism, I would call it.
Yeah. And the fact that people are trying, I mean, you got Javier Milei right across the border in Argentina, who's a big Trump guy. He's such a loser. He is such a loser. And now Cast, is trying the same thing. So it's really interesting from an anthropological point of view to see how the MAGA movement has gone international. But, let's hope that, Chile's not going to go MAGA.
Mecca.
Yeah. Well, no,
DMC. Macabre.
Yeah.
It'd be really macabre.
Yeah.
No, fuck. What am I messing up? MCGA.
Yeah, MCGA.
MCGA.
Yeah. I see why they went with MAGA, I suppose.
Yeah.
Rolls off tongue better. Make America, as in South America, great again.
Right. That's not good.
If you're enjoying the show, consider supporting us at solidaritytelevision.org. A red meat allergy caused by ticks killed a New Jersey man, November 15, 2025, via NPR. Researchers say they believe they've documented the first known death from alpha-gal syndrome, a red meat allergy caused by tick bites. The findings by the researchers at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. The report says that a 47-year-old airplane pilot in New Jersey fell ill 4 hours after eating a hamburger at a barbecue in 2024. The man's son found him unconscious on the floor of a bathroom surrounded by vomit. The man was declared dead at a hospital. The autopsy cited a sudden, unexplained death. 2 weeks before he died, the man had become ill several hours after eating a steak dinner, waking up with abdominal discomfort, writhing in pain, having diarrhea, and vomiting. "I thought I was going to die," he told his son. But the man and his wife decided not to consult a doctor, saying they weren't sure how to explain what had happened. A blood sample collected after the man's death showed he had an allergic reaction. His wife said that earlier that summer he had 12 or 13 chigger, or tiny mite larvae, bites around his ankles that left itchy, small bumps. But scientists believe those bites were actually from the larvae of Lone Star ticks, which can cause alpha-gal syndrome, a tick-borne illness that causes a red meat allergy. Alpha-gal is a sugar molecule found in mammals like cows, pigs, and lambs. It is also found in the saliva of some ticks. Humans don't produce the molecule, so when a tick transmits it, alpha-gal can produce a hive-like rash or an anaphylactic reaction about 2 to 6 hours after a person consumes red meat. It's like it's trying to fight off, said Saravan Thanagami, who directs the SUNY Center for Vector-Borne Diseases at Upstate Medical University. It is a foreign body, but basically as a result of that, we have this anaphylactic shock or allergy. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said there are more than 110,000 suspected cases identified between 2010 and 2022. But the CDC said the number of cases is likely higher, with as many as 450,000 people affected, as many people are unaware of the allergy and it requires a diagnostic test. In a report released in July of 2023, the CDC said 42% of surveyed healthcare providers had never heard of the disease. The American Gastroenterological Association advises people with unexplained diarrhea, nausea, and abdominal pain to be tested for alpha-gal syndrome. In the U.S., alpha-gal syndrome is primarily associated with Lone Star ticks, according to the CDC. Most reported cases occur in the South, East, and Central states where Lone Star ticks are common. Thangamani, who runs the Upstate Tick Testing Laboratory in New York, said the number of Lone Star tick encounters this year in that state sent to his lab doubled from 2024. And he notes a trend of Lone Star ticks migrating north. In 2023, we received ticks from 7 counties in New York State that are Lone Star tick encounters, Thangamani said. This year we got about 15 counties. In addition to increasing numbers, they're also expanding in geographic range, so this is a cause of concern. There is no vaccine to prevent alpha-gal syndrome. After infection, physicians recommend patients change their diet to avoid consuming meat such as beef, pork, lamb, venison, or rabbit. Thangamani said preventing tick bites is key to avoiding tick-borne illnesses. This includes wearing repellent like DEET, protective clothing, and avoiding tick habitats. If you're bitten by a tick, remove it as quickly as possible and save it in a plastic bag. That way doctors could identify what kind of tick it is and even test it for disease. We can't reduce the tick exposure, but if we can remove the tick as soon as we come from an outdoor activity, we essentially eliminate a lot of the issues that arise after a tick bite, Thangamani said.
So that's a story that could really tick some people off.
Veganism is contagious.
Yeah. Yeah, I support that. I was actually speaking with a friend recently, last night actually. I was at a friend's birthday party, and he's a close friend of mine. He told me, I never knew this, he has Lyme disease.
Okay.
This is not a setup to a joke, it's a true story. And like apparently like really messes with your like energy levels and stuff. But yeah, crazy.
Yeah, and it's scary to think that, you know, you could get a bite that you have barely took any notice of. And not only can you no longer eat red meat without having a violent allergic reaction, which sucks on its own for many people, but the fact that so many doctors straight up don't know about it, and so if you went, oh yeah, I got bit by a tick, they might not even test for it, or that it might be, you straight up might not know until you eat a hamburger and then die. I mean, luckily, the first person ever has just died of it, which I feel like kind of bodes well. But at the same time, the first person ever that we know of has died of it. Who's to say someone didn't eat a burger and was driving home from McDonald's on the highway, had a problem and crashed, and then they died of a car accident.
Yeah.
So, it's yeah.
It's got to suck dying with meat sweats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, it's a horrible way to go. I mean, dying of anaphylaxis of anything is pretty bad, but especially if you already enjoy your red meat, and it's not just like beef, and it's beef, pork, lamb.
Yeah.
So, or was another one that they mentioned? I don't remember offhand. Another big one. I feel like I should know. Whatever. And this is in everything. So I don't know to what extent the allergy is. Only if you eat the actual mussels themselves, maybe. But and ticks are a real problem. And they're obviously the Lone Star tick, which seems to be the carrier of this disease, is spreading. It's already gone through here. It's hit New York. It's spreading through New York. It's on the rise, and the most you can do is hope you don't get bit. And there are ways to prevent it, like the article said. Use DEET, other bug spray type stuff, but DEET especially. Cover up. We know that ticks like to go into warm covered areas. Mm-hmm. So I think the head and the groin, especially in the armpits.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can protect yourself from that, you can brush them off, then your skin. Don't go into places where ticks are. But it is interesting to think about what this could mean for the long run for the meat industry, meat packing industry in the United States, if this disease became prevalent, as opposed to just a couple hundred thousand cases. So, the agricultural industry is one thing, but the meat industry, especially beef, is a very big player in politics, beef and dairy as well. Very big player in politics and in land use in the United States. I mean, it helped drive westward expansion. That's where you get cowboys from, is people specifically the term cowboy, specifically black individuals who were driving cattle across the country from grazing lands to grazing lands and then eventually to market to sell. So the beef industry is a very big part of American culture and history. I mean, the hamburger is the iconic food of the American. So it's almost ironic to think that could be taken away by a tick.
Yeah.
If, there's no vaccine for it, public health services are negligible, let's be honest. Although it is cool, you can, at least in a couple states, you can, if you catch a tick on you, you can just mail it for free to a tick lab and they'll just study it.
Right.
So, and you can get a heads up you have this disease or not. So if you've been bitten by a tick recently, get tested, I guess, or test the tick if you can. We're moving into winter. Ticks go pretty dormant at this time of year, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be probably out in the woods for that to be a thing.
The hunting season's right around the corner, though.
Yeah.
Oh, venison. That was the other one. Yeah, venison.
Oh, word.
Yeah. That was the fourth one that I was trying to think of.
How can we forget about venison?
Yeah, it's the big one. It's the big one here. We don't have cows. We do have so many deer. I drove past probably 3 on my way to work this morning. So, yeah, scary stuff. Not to be fear-mongery about it, because again, 450,000 people at most in the United States have had it since 2010. And it's a pretty decent amount of people, but not like a huge amount of people. It's like the population of Pittsburgh, maybe, based on my little knowledge of Pittsburgh, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
And imagine an entire city of people that were like, are there any scary symptoms? They just can't eat meat?
Yeah, you, aside from the symptoms that come with getting bit.
Right.
This little,
So it's not really like a horror movie. It wouldn't be like a zombie city. It would be like a city of people that are like, we're going to be vegans now.
Yeah.
And then they're like upset about it at first, but then they're healthy and they encourage other people. And then maybe that chips away at the power of some of these big, meat companies. That might be a cool movie.
Also gives you a great excuse too if you're vegan or vegetarian and you have family members at Thanksgiving or whatever who are going to cause problems. Oh, well, no, see, I got bit by a tick earlier this year. Yeah. Now I can't have meat.
Yeah, they're like, what? And just be like Lone Star and then say nothing else.
Yeah.
And then it'll just be their job to figure it out.
Yeah, and they look it up, say, oh, yeah, you can't eat meat. You get sick from meat. And then, I don't know, could be a good excuse. So, yeah, Thanksgiving's coming up, guys. Give it a thought. Of course, I don't think it applies to turkey, but,
right.
The kind of person who's going to be annoyed at you for not eating meat is probably the kind of person who's not going to be too discerning about.
Probably not. Yeah.
So.
Hey, Solidarity TV is an independent grassroots news organization. That means we rely exclusively on support from viewers like you. Support us at solidaritytelevision.org. Under President Trump, an agency intended to keep Americans safe has diverted resources from combating child abuse, trafficking, and terrorism. November 16, 2025, via the New York Times. The Department of Homeland Security has diverted thousands of federal agents from their normal duties to focus on arresting undocumented immigrants, undermining a wide range of law enforcement operations in response to mounting pressure from President Trump, a New York Times investigation has found. Homeland Security agents investigating sexual crimes against children, for instance, have been redeployed to the immigrant crackdown for weeks at a time, hampering their pursuit of child predators. A national security probe into the black market for Iranian oil sold to finance terrorism has been slowed down for months because of the shift to immigration work, allowing tanker ships and money to disappear. And federal efforts to combat human smuggling and sex trafficking have languished, with investigators reassigned to help staff deportation efforts. The changes have extended deep into DHS's public safety mission, as the Coast Guard has diverted aircraft to transport immigrants between detention centers, and the department's Law Enforcement Academy has delayed training for many agencies to prioritize new immigration officers. The Times investigation is based on previously undisclosed internal documents from DHS, including statistical reports about department workloads, search warrants and arrests obtained through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. The Times also spoke with more than 65 officials who have worked in the federal government during the current Trump administration, in addition to local authorities and others who collaborate with the department. Most of them spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive matters and out of fear of retribution. The overhaul represents a striking departure for the behemoth agency that Congress created in response to the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The Homeland Security Department was tasked with preventing terrorism, protecting the president, investigating transnational crime, and responding to natural disasters, among other duties. Immigration enforcement was one of the many responsibilities, but it was not envisioned as DHS's singular function. Today, the Trump administration has remade the agency into a veritable Department of Deportation. The Republican policy bill enacted this summer made the administration's priorities clear, with about $162 billion in new DHS funding for border security and immigration enforcement, significantly shifting the department's focus. More than half of the department's annual budget is projected to fund immigration activities over the next few years, up from 37% during last fiscal year, according to a Times analysis. ICE's budget is expected to nearly triple and its staff to grow by 66%, an investment that will make it the nation's highest-funded law enforcement agency. Every incoming administration prioritizes its own policy goals, and Homeland Security officials often describe a sense of whiplash when a new president takes power. Under President Joseph R. Biden Jr., some agents were pulled off investigations and sent to help process migrants coming over the southern border. But Mr. Trump's overhaul surpasses previous efforts, according to current and former officials. DHS keeps being pulled further away from its core mission in protecting the homeland, said David LaPone, who served as the department's press secretary during the first Trump administration. These distractions could have deadly consequences.
So the immigration article from the Times I see on two levels. The first level is the Times is reporting as an objective phenomena that I think any sane person can see is the racist hysteria over illegal immigrant invaders is becoming this ideological and institutional momentum that is kind of expanding into so many areas of our culture that's becoming almost like a mission creep of its own. It's kind of like altering other trajectories that already exist in the culture. Mm-hmm. And they're just being like, look at this. Okay. The other thing they're doing is also kind of, be in New York Times, being kind of like making the liberal critique, which is like not only going after Trump and MAGA for, doing this and for corrupting DHS, which is like, okay, that's fine. We welcome I welcome all of the criticisms of Trump. But what I think this article shows is it's such a characteristic, like liberal technocratic perspective, because it's almost like saying, the DHS has a proper function. Mm-hmm. The DHS is a good institution, and you are corrupting it. And the problem is that we need to get in and fix our institutions. Almost like when the Dems, except for Fetterman, was like, hey, cut that shit out in Venezuela. And they're like, really? And they're like, no, we just want to be part of it. And they're like, oh, okay. So like, you know what I mean? So they're not really like obviously coming at it from like an a principle perspective. Mm-hmm. And with this thing, it's almost like they're saying, well, we need to like get the DHS back to its good old post 9/11 like bureaucratic centralization of Islamophobic imperial fear-mongering propaganda, totalitarian mission creep that it itself had. You know what I mean? Yeah. So to me, DHS is inherently just like an illegitimate institution. Mm-hmm. It's part of the, global empire turn inward police state. So yes, I don't like that it's being, of course, when you look at it in that narrow sense, like it shouldn't be diverting resources from child predators and financial crime and all these other things that it was doing, and instead directing it toward immigrants. We don't love that, but I hate the empire more than all that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my take on it. I kind of see that level of it.
No, I'm totally with you. I mean, I'm a big hater of the DHS. It does not secure the homeland. I hate the term the homeland.
Hate the homeland.
And we always see ICE, protect the homeland, protect the homeland. Come on, let's be real here. This is not my homeland, exactly, but that's beside the point. The article itself, from the New York War Crimes, goes and it says one of the things that the DHS has had to divert resources from was illegal Iranian oil sales to fund terrorism. Yeah. What the hell are they talking about? What terrorism does Iran support?
The Houthis.
Yeah. The noble men and women of Ansar Allah, the noble men and women of Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, noble men and women of Hezbollah, and maybe the Iraqi resistance as well. I'm not sure if they're connected with Iraq. But, these, first off, Iran does not actually materially support Ansar Allah, the Houthis in Yemen. They do it all themselves. Every single ballistic missile that Yemen fires into Israel, they designed and built from scratch. So, all props to them. Yeah, the United States recognizes this. Israel, I think, is basically the only country that refuses to recognize that. And so, these oil sales. As if also Iran isn't allowed to sell its oil to do things. I mean, we're going to criticize Iran for so-called illegal oil sales to generate untraceable cash to siphon off to belligerents. Where have we heard that one before? Yeah. Ronald fucking Reagan did the exact same thing, shuffling crack cocaine into particularly black neighborhoods in the United States, but also selling weapons illegally to Iran during U.S. arms embargo.
Or even more recently in Syria, some of the black market operations to fund some of our moderate rebels.
Yeah. Moderate rebels like ISIS that just took over Syria, yeah. So you're absolutely right in your analysis that this is the New York Times doing its neoliberal propagandizing in order to, it's great to have voice against Trump. And it does suck that an agency that could, generously speaking, be used to help people like combating human trafficking, sex trafficking, child predation, and the Coast Guard, which should nominally be rescuing people whose boats capsize at sea or whatever, and redirecting those resources into the ethnic cleansing of the United States, or the ethnic cleansing of Hispanics from the United States. But of course, the real reason is that none of these other missions threaten either the U.S. empire or white supremacy. Child predators, we know, do not threaten the U.S. empire, they run it. And sex trafficking does not threaten the U.S. empire. It's a product of it. If you want to see sex trafficking, go to any U.S. military base overseas, probably stateside as well, but especially overseas. It's one of the ongoing problems we have with the continued U.S. occupation of the south of Korea, is that the comfort women stratagem of the Japanese empire hasn't stopped, it's just changed to service American servicemen instead of Japanese ones. And go anywhere where the U.S. military has a large presence, and you're going to see a ton of sexual violence and sex crimes, sex trafficking, child predation. Yeah. Afghanistan was a huge one. The Mujahideen in the 80s that the United States sponsored before the Soviets intervened and necessitated the Soviet intervention that was requested by the democratically elected socialist government of Afghanistan, were really, really big into the sexual predation of young boys and the sexual violence that they committed against both young Afghani boys, probably girls as well. I feel like the intense homophobia of the era and of our time focuses more on sexual violence against young men, but I don't know much about the sexual violence against young girls in particular in the Afghan hinterland. I have to imagine it was present. One of the big reasons why this whole thing started is that the government said, hey, girls get to go to school too. Everyone's like, the fuck they are. And America, give us money, blow these people up. And they did. But it was so widespread to the point where one of the plans that the State Department had was to try to get Soviet soldiers to defect. And it was seen as so unthinkable because of what we had empowered the Mujahideen to do, that the CIA had to go in with film footage of U.S.-sponsored mass sexual violence against Soviet soldiers in order to convince the State Department that there was no way any Soviet at all would ever defect to the Mujahideen. So,
by the way, when the Afghanistan papers came out a few years ago, the Washington Post published them, there were still stories of that even into the 21st century, following the 2001 October 7th. invasion of Afghanistan by the United States.
Yeah.
Like basically some of our like warlord allies in Afghanistan were doing this kind of like sexual prisoner shit.
Yeah, and the U.S. Army was told, just look the other way because these are our buddies.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know, to their credit, to the Imperial Stormtroopers' credit, many U.S. soldiers felt deeply uncomfortable with that. Did it stop them from obliterating Afghanistan? No, of course not. But to their credit, they did recognize that was bad and wrong, for whatever that's worth. Yeah, so if you want to worry about sex trafficking, drug trafficking, I mean, the Fort Bragg cartel.
Start at home.
Yeah. If you want to know about drug trafficking, I mean, that's back to Afghanistan, that's half of what the whole war is about. The ownership of the poppy and the production of opioids. So why so many soldiers came back hooked on opioids? They were abundant there by the nature of the U.S. imperial occupation. So
drug money is also such an enormous chunk of the global economic system. And available studies of this money passing through the big banks show that this is a reliable, important part of revenue and capital flow for these institutions. So it's like, I don't know, I guess you'd call it like an open secret, that there's no formal separation between the global, capitalist financial system and the seedy underworld of the drug market.
We often consider, I mean, we just talked about this in the Chile segment, that, the immigrants, like the drugs come from outside.
Right.
And we have the Mexican cartels, and now there's I don't want to even call it a color revolution, the dipshit revolution in Mexico City, where you have like 40 guys with neo-Nazi signs and Nazi flags trying to break down the doors of whatever the building is. Is it the presidential palace in Mexico? I don't know. Break down wherever Claudia Sheinbaum works, calling her a Jewish whore and whatnot. Oh, we have to go, it's because the cartels. But ask any Mexican and they'll tell you the cartel problem is an American problem that is inflicted upon the Mexicans. It's not a Mexican drug problem that is affecting Americans. The Americans are the ones consuming the drugs. And of course, like Barack Obama, shuffling weapons into the hands of the narcos in order to continue the destabilization of a socialist Mexico. I mean, that was kind of the whole thing back in the 70s. So if you want to get into the Department of Homeland Security, fighting the terrorists, the narco-terrorists, Fort Bragg, go to Fort Bragg. That's where they all are. Go to Langley. It's where they all are. Or the rest of them, I should say. And you want to talk about sex trafficking, go hunt down President of the United States and all of his cronies.
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. Yeah. And that's another thing. I wish it was an article we were covering today, but whatever it takes to take down Bill Clinton, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Get him.
Yeah.
He's a horrible guy, criminal. Yeah. Get rid of him. Get him.
He is responsible for what happened to Iraq just as much as Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. What he did to Haiti is unthinkable. Yeah. Was he wasn't the one at no, that was Bush in the Caribbean, Grenada, I think. That was Bush, yeah?
Grenada was Reagan, Panama was Bush Sr.
Panama was Bush, okay, yeah. So, yeah, get Clinton. And you want to go after the child predators, that's where they are.
Ehud Barak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we will be talking about Epstein later, actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, we'll say that for them. But, that's where they all are. So, and then if you want to pull guys out of the water who are sinking their ships or getting their ships wrecked, I should say, it's probably not their fault. Yeah, that's what the Coast Guard should be doing. So, Department of Homeland Security ethnically cleansing Hispanics from the United States, most of whom have never committed any crime aside from, I think it was like 8% of deportees have committed a crime, and 9% of deportees have committed a traffic, what do you call that, traffic violation. Yeah. So if we're deporting all the speeders,
yeah.
See ya. Hey comrades, remember the words of Chairman Mao. civilize the mind, and make savage the body. If it makes sense for you, consider skipping the elevator and taking the stairs instead. Canada signs $300 million grant to launch one of the world's largest Indigenous-led land conservation projects, July 21, 2025, via Canada. Today, the Honourable Julie Deportations, Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and Danny Yakalea, Chair of Our Land for the Future Trust, signed a historic agreement to launch NWT Our Land for the Future, one of the largest Indigenous-led land conservation initiatives in the world. Backed by $375 million in new investments, including $300 million from Canada and $75 million from philanthropic partners, NWT Our Land for the Future will support Indigenous-led stewardship and conservation across some of the world's most intact boreal and tundra ecosystems, while generating hundreds of good, culturally meaningful jobs across the territory. Indigenous partners to NWT Our Land for the Future aim to conserve and steward up to 380,000 square kilometers of land and inland water, which is nearly 30% of the territory, including the protection and conservation of over 2% of Canada in new terrestrial and freshwater areas. This represents a space almost 7 times the size of Nova Scotia. Key activities and initiatives that could receive funding include Indigenous Guardians, with support for operations, training, recruitment, and career development of guardians who monitor ecological health, protect cultural sites, and safeguard sensitive areas and species. Establishing and stewarding protected areas, conserved areas, and Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, IPCAs, both new and existing. Climate action, including research, impact assessments, adaptation strategies, and mitigation activities related to climate change. Local and regional conservation-based economic developments, such as Indigenous harvesting economies, ecotourism, cultural tourism, traditional arts, and artisanal enterprises will not only contribute to environmental preservation, but also provide sustainable economic opportunities for Indigenous communities and the region at large. This groundbreaking partnership involves 21 Indigenous governments and organizations, the Government of Canada, the Government of the Northwest Territories, and private donors working together to advance Indigenous-led stewardship in the North for the benefit of all Canadians. Today marks a pivotal moment in our efforts towards climate action and conservation. NWT Our Land for the Future stands out as one of the largest Indigenous-led land conservation efforts globally, aiming to foster sustainable practices and economic growth throughout the Northwest Territories. This initiative, led and governed by Indigenous peoples, will advance large-scale long-term conservation, stewardship, and economic development throughout the Northwest Territories. It will generate hundreds of good, culturally meaningful jobs, sustaining Indigenous ways of life for generations to come, and drive climate action and resilience. This initiative shows the progress possible through a tailored regional approach, engaging communities to identify important ecological and cultural areas. This not only provides clarity for industries, but also streamlines conservation planning and project approvals. Initiatives like this will make it possible to protect these natural spaces for future generations. Traditionally, Canada's relationship with its Indigenous peoples has been nothing short of evil. This is no surprise coming to a pair of Americans, but I've heard, and this is probably experience-based rather than maybe evidence-based, but Canada was and has been worse to the Native Americans than in the United States. I mean, I think their last residential schools ran until the 90s. The Oka crisis of the 90s, I mean, I guess it's not too different from Wounded Knee standoff in the 70s, but the Oka crisis we discussed a week or two ago, in which a child was bayoneted by the Canadian Army. A few years ago, probably at this point, the Canadian fishing groups had been barricading Indigenous fishermen from getting access to fishing waters because the subsistence fishing of the Indigenous fishermen could potentially intrude on commercial fishing profiteering. And of course, just this past weekend, the Vatican returned stolen Indigenous items that the Catholic missionaries had, would be generous and say, acquired in 1925. The Canadian government had outlawed the potlatch tradition in the Pacific Northwest. It was actually something I learned about in university. Basically, it was a ceremony in which annually the native groups would, or I wish I could remember what people group, but this one people group, they'd sail up the river, and usually in their log boats, and meet the chief at his residence. And it'd be like a week-long party kind of thing, and he would give them all gifts. So it's almost like a reverse Christmas type of thing. And it was supposed to highlight and then re-cement the power and influence of the community leader, as he would, I don't want to say secure his position, but he would emphasize his position through generosity. And the more he could give to the people, the better of a leader he was. Reminds me of the scene, did you ever watch Lawrence of Arabia?
No.
So there's this scene in which they're talking to the one Bedouin leader, and he's talking about his relationship with the Turks, and they're like, yeah, you know, you, because the whole movie is about them trying to start the rebellion against the Turks. And basically he says, you know, I've gotten tons of wounds in battle, I've plundered my enemies, I've taken their lands, their sheep, their wealth, and then to keep me out of trouble, the Turks pay me billions of dollars in gold. But, he says, and yet despite all that, I am poor because I am a river to my people. And that is the premise of the potlatch ceremony, that the chief is a river to his people. And it was banned for years, I think over 100 years, from the 1880s to, I want to say into the 2000s, but don't quote me on that for certain, because it undermined the authority, it potentially would undermine the authority of the Canadian government by there being another person who could run community and provide for the community outside of the control and influence of the European colonial government. So, you know, Canada has been really bad about this, and it's not drastically different from what the United States has done and continues to do, but I think that my observation has been that there's a little bit less awareness in Canada of their crimes and continued crimes against the Indigenous populations, and the end result of that is that they, it seems to me, can get away with a lot more brutality. What they call the Starlight Tours, where the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, will just pick up Indigenous people, drive them out into the middle of nowhere, particularly in the winter, kick them out of the car and just drive home, and then they have to walk through the wilderness, if they even know where they're going, to try to get their way home. And they do that just for sport, to abuse the Native Americans. So, you know, with that context, these mediocre, moderate steps towards a reintroduction of what could be considered Indigenous sovereignty is definitely a step in the right direction, in my analysis.
So my first action, actually this is my second action. My first action was in Brooklyn, New York, but my second action ever was protesting the Keystone XL pipeline, which is just, it touches upon the same exact context that you kind of mapped out. It just dawned on me while you were speaking. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like one of the first big things I ever did, you know, kind of politically in terms of actions. But yeah, there's not really much more I can add to, you know, what you touched upon. You know, it was a good way of framing it all. You know, Canada is part of the Anglo-American settler colonial empire, and you know, we share some of these corporate ties. I know that the Canadian and American ruling classes are interlinked in some under-acknowledged but very crucial ways. And some of these mining companies are crucial to it. And yeah.
What, 90% of all mining companies are Canadian?
Yeah, yeah. That's, and for example, the 2009 coup in Honduras was largely, in fact, in some cases, some people would say principally, directed at the behest of Canadian corporate interests as well as American corporate interests, and American strategic imperial interests. But yeah, this is an ongoing thing with like Indigenous rights, Indigenous waters, Indigenous lands, and mining companies. yeah, so I'm glad that we were able to kind of cover it.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too into the myth, if you would, about indigenous peoples and the mystique and fantasy about the indigenous relationship with the land. But there has been, and I know we've discussed this before, a very big difference between the way that indigenous people have traditionally engaged with the land itself and the way that the white settler has engaged with the land. Where, and again, I know we're repeating some things, but the indigenous person, again, broadly speaking, engaged in a relationship with the land in which the land itself was a participant in a relationship, sort of.
I don't think that's a myth. I think that's just...
Well, there's a lot of especially in the white bourgeois class, there's a lot of this idea of the magical Indian type of thing.
Sure.
So I don't want to get, the Native American, there was never any wildfires and the Native Americans lived here.
We don't know how to handle other people, so we either exterminate and dismiss their more mystical and spiritual worldview from our dead secular machine consciousness, or narrow-minded kind of romantic bourgeois people will make a caricature of it and condescendingly, patronizingly worship it. And it can't just be seen on its own terms.
Yeah. And of course, the condescending and
the myth of the noble savage.
Yeah. And the patronizing and paternalistic view comes afterwards, right? How many people were celebrating the Native Americans in that way before the government tried to have them all wiped out, right? So it's as soon as, and we'll probably see this with the Arab peoples in a few generations, where there's going to be, a new rise in Arabism. We saw prior to the British imperialism, with stories like Lawrence of Arabia, where there's this myth of the native and they're special and spectacular and whatnot. But we're getting a bit off topic. But the relationship that the Native Americans broadly had with the land was that of a relationship between two partners. And the land wasn't something to be owned and as a possession, but it's something that gave to you and you were obligated to care for in return. And even that sounds a little paternalistic in the way I'm saying it. There's probably a better way of expressing that. And then, of course, the European settler colonial relationship with the land is that of exploitation. The land exists to be owned as a possession. The land itself is a possession to rip as much out as you can and then discard. And we see this probably illustrated so well in Israel, both with the Israeli platform of, a land without a people for a people without a land.
Just quick tangent, you almost read my mind, because I was like, don't go there. But okay, so one of the kind of theological sources of modernity is the Judeo-Christian tradition. And in Genesis, what we are told it says in Genesis is basically you should have dominion over the earth. But actually, it's not really what it says. It doesn't say that. That's a mistranslation, kind of like you hear what you want to hear, you read what you want to read. The actual meaning of the original language is more like you're supposed to live in harmony with the earth. But anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really good and interesting to know. And the way I was raised in that environment, the way that it was taught to me was that dominion in the sense that you were supposed to be on top, but you weren't supposed to. But just like the father in the family, you're supposed to run the place. You're not supposed to beat your wife, kind of thing. Right. Which is especially saying it out loud,
really weird.
Wow. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Israeli mantra of a land without a people doesn't mean, and was never, when it was first uttered, did not mean that there were no people living there. It was that the people who did live there didn't use the land in a European exploitative sense.
It's the doctrine of terra nullius.
Yeah. They lived in cohesion with the land instead of dominating it. And by European standards, that meant that the land wasn't being used, so it was free to take.
Right.
Which is how we got to what we did in North America as well against the Native Americans. So all of that to say, and you can see this, by the way, that this is about wildfires. And, Israel keeps catching on fire because they got rid of all the native plants and kept planting stupid-ass European plants, which burn in the desert. Wow, who could have guessed that plants from like fucking Poland don't do well in the desert?
That goes right in with like the claim that Palestinians will make that just like these people are not fucking indigenous because look at how they treat the olive trees.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, it's exactly what you said. It's like, dude, what are they doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These are like European, like racist, traumatized by like German and Austrian fucking crop failure bullshit coming up with like a racist solution people. They're not like, they're not indigenous.
And that's the exact same thing we see with the land. I mean, we got in North America, we got the classic Three Sisters, which are all plants that work together. You have the seed corn supporting the bean crop, which is then protected by the squash kind of thing. And then you bulldoze it all to plant maize. You plant corn, you plant tobacco, and tobacco especially because it was huge for revenue driven. As the land was used to, that's probably the best way to have said it in the first place. The land, the European colonial mindset is that the land exists to create revenue. Of course, we know that there are two ways to create profit. It's from stealing excess labor, or two ways to generate wealth is from labor or the natural produce of the earth. So the natural produce of the earth can be manipulated in order to drive profit, which is what we see the
Make
Americans
it the unnatural
Canadians.
produce of the earth.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. So all that to say, a return to indigenous stewardship of the land, hopefully, will mean, and I say hopefully because I don't trust Canada, but I don't know any of these private donors or organizations involved.
You know, this is like a really rough, I've never thought this just came to me, but like the idea of like intellectual capital is huge right now. And this can get to, oh my God, like owning seeds and shit like that. You know, like that dark fucking world that is a rabbit hole that we should talk about some other time. But like, okay, so there's that, and then there's like intellectual capital in the European sense, in this kind of like Frankenstein sense. But then there's like ancient indigenous wisdom, which like, it would be an insult to call it intellectual capital. It's a different form of like, this is sacred wisdom that we cherish and we are passing down, like between, you know, women or between families or like whatever it is, not just working the earth, but like other forms of knowing things. And it's just what we have done with that and how we have not respected that is, I feel like, a really, really big part of the story of how we got here that, you know, I would like to learn more about. So I'm glad this kind of made me more curious. I'm going to go look into that.
Yeah. So let's hope that the Northwest Territories, one of the 13 territories of Canada, will get to see some serious land health and land use. Hey comrades, this week's book recommendation is The Fort Bragg Cartel by Seth Harp. This book is an expose into the criminal underbelly tying together the United States Special Forces. The media focus on Epstein's ties to Trump and ignore his ties to Israel. November 13th, 2025, via Caitlin Johnston. The way the press have been covering Jeffrey Epstein's ties to Trump while completely ignoring far more significant revelations of Epstein's ties to Israeli intelligence is such a perfect example of how Western media ignores anything that doesn't fit neatly into the two-party worldview. If there's not some kind of partisan angle to it the Democrats can use to attack Republicans, or Republicans can use to attack Democrats, it tends to get conspicuously overlooked, which just so happens to align nicely with the objectives of the U.S. empire. The empire doesn't want people looking too closely at the evil things the U.S. and Israel have been doing together, regardless of who is in office, so the Western press tend to ignore these things wherever possible. The empire doesn't want people keeping track of what countries the U.S. war machine is bombing from administration to administration. So the Western press keep this information so silent that every few months I'll see a viral tweet from some American going, "Wait a second, we've been bombing Somalia this whole time?" Or, "We've got troops in Kenya?" The overwhelming majority of the empire's abuses remain in place regardless of which political party happens to be in power or what the current U.S. president's campaign platform was: war, genocide, militarism, imperialist extraction, ecocidal capitalism, soaring inequality, poverty, homelessness, police militarization, the ever-expanding surveillance network, censorship, propaganda, government lies and opacity, the crimes of the Imperial Intelligence Alliance. All of the worst things about our dystopian civilization here and the globe-spanning power structure that is loosely centralized around the United States keep marching forward completely uninterrupted from presidency to presidency, while the mass media ignore them and keep the public fixated on irrelevant feuding between America's two mainstream political factions. This is because the mass media of the Western world do not exist to report on the major news stories of our day. They exist to indoctrinate, distract, and manipulate. They are not news services, they are propaganda services. Adding a few more details of Trump's already well-documented Epstein ties to the information ecosystem will drum up a lot of interest and attention and monopolize political discourse for a day or two, but it won't change anything. The American public developing a universal revulsion towards Israel and its own involvement in their country's affairs, however, would have far-reaching consequences that could change the face of the world, which is why the propaganda services of the empire are focusing on the former rather than the latter.
Hey, did you hear how Epstein had connections to Trump, but no one or no thing else?
Yeah, just that was it.
You've only been looking at
CNN.
Yeah,
And sometimes
because I've only been looking into Epstein's connections with Trump.
Yeah, that's the only
Because that's all you need to know.
Yeah. Trump is bad and Epstein are bad because they know each other.
That's why I'm going to vote blue in 2028. So I'm pretty excited.
No, I mean, perhaps the worst, maybe not the worst. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but one of the most frustrating things I've been seeing from so-called leftists, from Democrats and liberals, is them gloating over the fact that Bill Clinton reportedly was never on the island. Oh, Bill Clinton wasn't on the island, ha ha ha. As if you can't, abuse children in the airplane he was on a billion times. But as if that makes Bill Clinton blameless, as if the only thing holding Bill Clinton back from being some kind of demigod.
Mm-hmm. He's already killed a fuck ton of Iraqi children.
Yeah, over 500. Well, remember, Madeleine Albright said it.
Yeah, it was worth it. Yeah, you're right. Thanks, Madeleine.
It was worth it. My life would have been so much worse if those 500,000 children were alive.
Yeah.
But and the connections to Israel. Honestly, I personally haven't been spending a lot of time studying that because too much of it feels conspiratorial. I'm not saying it is. But, Jeffrey Epstein worked for Mossad just feels like something that some guy on the street would tell you before trying to explain, that the local bank was owned by Jews.
Right.
It's like, okay, bud. So, and I'm not dismissing it, just it's not something I have really looked into because every time I've heard it, it just sounds like, yeah, maybe, but I don't want to be the guy to repeat that. Mm-hmm. So... But like the connections that we were discussing earlier between this stuff, whether or not Trump's connections to Epstein or is what matters is ridiculous, right? Because these guys are genocidal murderers, and if them molesting children is going to be what finally gets them behind bars. That sucks for the kids. But, I'll take it. But, they are, again, genocidal monsters. Joe Biden didn't have to be in the Epstein list for him to deserve being hanged. Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton didn't have to molest children for her to earn being hanged. Mm-hmm. Bill Clinton Bill Clinton was a rapist anyway. Right. Regardless of Epstein, he literally raped people. Yeah. So Trump too. We all know this. Yeah. But women don't matter. Just the cultural idea behind pedophilia as being the one crime that you can justifiably, or that you can feel good about wishing violence upon people is what matters. This is just a bit of an aside, if you will. Yeah. I feel that this probably isn't the most popular opinion, but I feel that America has a really strange probably the world in general, but America has a really strange relationship with the idea of pedophilia, in the sense that, broadly speaking, people are totally okay with it. But I mean, the half of the porn industry basically is bent on that, is built on this. But people have a lot of violent fantasies, and pedophiles and pedophilia is the one of the very few crimes that one can commit that enough of the population will feel negatively towards you in such excess that violence is completely acceptable. How many times have we seen stuff like, oh, you know, some YouTuber baits some guy into thinking he's going to meet up with some teenager, and then they go and they just beat the shit out of him on the street. And it's just to participate in violence for pleasure, but get away with it under the auspices of justice.
Right.
Which is kind of how the U.S. operates anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Trump or Clinton rape women, and it gets brushed under the rug. But now it's a child, and now that's something worth worrying about. And it just kind of feeds back into, which of course it is, obviously.
Right.
But of course, I feel like it feeds back into that idea that people don't care about women, and that this almost Republican sense of
family.
Yeah, and ownership of children.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Probably someone in the comments is going to be mad at me about that, but I probably didn't even explain it the best myself.
No, well, it's an uncomfortable topic, and in order to explore uncomfortable topics, you have to be comfortable, like, giving rough draft thoughts out loud. And I mean, here we are. I'm like, it's like, let's publish it, but like, you know what I mean? And like, I always think it's okay to just like think out loud and be open to like exploring things. But anyway, it is an uncomfortable topic, and I think that you are onto something, and I get what you're saying. As for the issue that Caitlin Johnstone brought up in the article, something that made me think about is like what we might call like cootie logic, or like the liberal cootie argument or something like that, which is like there is a structured, detailed critique that you can make with depth. And you can be like, here's the argument. And then you can just be like, he knows him. Like he was in a room with them. Like they're connected to them, as if that in and of itself is an argument. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have a substantial connection to someone like Jeffrey Epstein, that like that is not defensible, that is problematic, to say the very least, like all that stuff. You know what I mean? But I guess what I'm trying to say, and I think what Caitlin Johnstone was trying to say, is like there's so much more depth to look at, geopolitically, historically, etc., to say Jeffrey Epstein is not some like in a vacuum villain that we can just say Trump is connected to him, or that someone else can say, you know, Bill Gates and the liberals are connected, like whatever the fuck it is, whoever your partisan side is. There's a deeper system to it that he may, if some of these Epstein Israeli intelligence ties are legitimate, even if we don't know what the full extent of it is, if they are at the very least like worth acknowledging and looking into, which I think that there's something there to acknowledge and look into without saying he's definitely Mossad, because some people have said, like Whitney Webb, he may have been more Israeli army intelligence than straight up Mossad. So that's a distinction that's relevant, and I'm not sure how to make that distinction yet. But again, Caitlin Johnstone's point is it's a bigger story if someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who is really more of a financial criminal, the point has been made, than he is a sex criminal, which is not to undermine his sex crimes, but to point out that he's involved in these major financial transactions and financial connections. And if someone like him has a connection and is some sort of an asset or a deal breaker, or like a node connecting, you know, the world of finance to the world of like military intelligence, that's a bigger story than like Trump knows him and like let's dunk on Trump and vote for the Dems or in 2028 or something like that. But again, the cootie argument is just like looking at someone you don't like politically and then finding someone who's bad, and then making a connection of being like there. And then therefore, if you like them, now you're connected, then everybody gets cooties, and then just to like avoid, demonization, you just go, oh my God, I'm not even gonna talk about them or something. That's not really making a real argument. And I think here, Caitlin Johnson is making an argument, and I think there are some analyses of Epstein that do make arguments, but I don't know if that makes sense, like the cootie logic of just trying to be like, well, so-and-so quoted this guy in his book, and this guy's a freak, so therefore this whole book sucks. It's like, well, I don't know if it works. Like that kind of logic, it's not really good logic.
And that's kind of what the Republicans did with Bill Clinton. They're like, oh, he had connections to Jeffrey Epstein, therefore Bill Clinton bad. Which, again, kind of like what we were both saying earlier, whether or not Bill Clinton molested children, he murdered 500,000 of them, but no one cares because they're Iraqi. And so the real stories here go so much deeper, but if you dare to go deeper, they indict U.S. empire and U.S. imperialism and oppression and exploitation and brutality. But when the victims are Americans or, dare I say, a fetishized victim group, that will drive people's emotional reactions. And it's all well and good to bomb a Sudanese medicine factory and kill tons and tons and tons of people by denying them access to healthcare, which every president has done for quite a while. It's one thing to do sanctions on Iraq and airstrike their infrastructure to such an extent that 500,000 children die. It's one thing to invade the Middle East, to commit genocide against the Palestinians. And, once all of that is fine, and none of that ever gets questioned by the U.S. media empire. The fact that Bill Clinton, the conversation about whether or not Bill Clinton is a good guy is centered around his Epstein connection, and not, how about the fact that he obliterated Haiti? I like using the term obliterated, I've noticed. But, he specifically undercut, a lot of Haitians were engaged in farming and whatnot, especially rice. And he undercut rice exports to Haiti, if I remember correctly, making foreign rice so cheap that everybody, because Haiti was so poor, everybody switched to buying foreign rice instead of buying locally produced rice, which destroyed these rice farms and forced the country into, it lost food sovereignty, and it forced the country into industrial work, largely like printing t-shirts for Disney World or stuff like that. And so all these farmers were destroyed, and of course the rice price went back up. And that was Bill Clinton's strategy as president. That was the beginning of Haiti's story is colonialism, but this is kind of like the start of the newest chapter. And of course, he did this because the biggest exporter of rice in the United States is his native state, home state of Arkansas. Yeah. And so he destroys Haiti for U.S. imperialism, and particularly for the rice business interests. But that should be enough to indict him.
Yeah, and so there's like a phenomena with like media, right? With just like TV shows and horror films, even. Like, I love horror films, and like I know that like once you see a lot of a certain thing, you're kind of like, oh, I've already seen a guy get stabbed, or like, oh, you see like in Terrifier, like someone get cut down vertically, and you're like, what's going to be in the next movie? Like, what are they going to do now? Because you kind of get desensitized. And like popular streaming series now, I mean, I can't really think of one, but I feel like the stuff that's just kind of like expected to be in like a TVMA series is so insane, so violent, so sexual, compared to like fucking, I don't even know, 6 Feet Under or like Sopranos or something. Like stuff back then that would be considered TVMA is just like PG-13 almost. Okay, so similarly, the Epstein story. Okay, the surface level, like sanitized, like small version of it is he solicited sex from a minor in 2008 or something in Florida, but that's it. And he did his time, and you know, that's it. That's kind of like what his defenders will say. If you go,
Epstein has defenders?
well, there are people who are. There's a journalist named Michael Tracy who, like, his beat right now is like everybody who thinks that there's something about Epstein is wrong and stupid, and there's really nothing, and they're all conspiracy theorists, and that's kind of like his take on it. Right. There's not really defenders, but you know what I mean? Okay. So beyond that, like, to go deeper into like the rabbit hole, he's part of an international network. There's an island, there's a plane. He's connected to all these ruling elites. He blackmails them, perhaps for Israeli intelligence, to control them and whatever it is. That story, whether it's true or not, I think is so salacious to people, understandably. But again, it shouldn't take that degree of salaciousness, confirmed or not, which then, if it isn't, then we're like, anything fucked up is therefore invalid, gatekeepers might say. It shouldn't take that degree of salaciousness to have a feeling of moral outrage or anger or like anti-imperial or anti-establishment rage, because exactly what you said about Haiti, that's very mainstream. There's nothing conspiratorial about that. That's completely empirical. That's just like, but what I'm saying is, like, in a fucked up way, compared to the Epstein story, that's like boring. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like the normal, ordinary, like banality of imperial evil becomes like, yeah, who cares about that? Once we kind of raise the level, once we raise the bar of like sensationalism mm-hmm. to like the Epstein story, and we make it about like, who do we take down using this story? Well, we got to take down Trump. And it's like, well, no, we got to take down his enemies. Or like, no, we got to like control how we talk about the narrative. You know what I mean? To kind of like contain it while exposing it at the same time, which is like mm-hmm. the tightrope that the mainstream media is doing. They want to talk about it, but like only talk about it in a Trump way. So it's just sad that, again, I think that we're desensitized to an extent, because there are totally normal, not normal, but way less controversial stories of corruption and decadence and violence that, you know, you gave one, that can and should indict like all of our presidents and many of our leaders and many of our leadership class. So that's kind of one kind of take I have on this.
Yeah. Hey, another way you can support us is by following us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. What is the International Stabilization Force for Gaza? November 18, 2025, via Al Jazeera. A UNSC resolution passed backing the creation of an international stabilization force in Gaza. On Monday, the UN Security Council passed a US-sponsored resolution which backs US President Donald Trump's 20-point plan for ending Israel's war on Gaza. Among the clauses was one that supported the creation and deployment of an international stabilization force, the ISF, to provide security and oversight of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. In theory, this security body will work with Israel and Egypt to demilitarize the Gaza Strip and will reportedly train a Palestinian police force. Despite the passing of a resolution that acknowledges the parties have accepted the Trump plan, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza continued, including on areas on the Palestinian side of the Yellow Line. The ISF is envisioned as a multinational force that would deploy to Gaza to help train police, secure the borders, maintain security by helping to demilitarize Gaza, protect civilians and humanitarian operations, including securing humanitarian corridors, among additional tasks as may be necessary in support of the comprehensive plan. Essentially, the force would take over many of the security responsibilities that have been managed by Hamas over the last 19 years. Since 2006, Hamas has been in charge of governing the Gaza Strip, including managing its social and security services. Trump's comprehensive plan is formulated with no input from Palestinian parties. Who makes up the force is still unclear, though under the resolution, the forces will work with Israel and Egypt and a newly trained Palestinian police force that will not be under Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. A senior advisor to Trump said Azerbaijan and Indonesia had offered to send troops. He also said Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE were in talks about contributing, though a senior Emirati official, Anwar Gargash, said his country would not participate. Reports have said Egypt could lead the force. In October, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said his country was ready to provide support to Gaza. But as tensions have heated up between Turkey and Israel, the latter's foreign minister Gideon Sayar said Israel would not agree to Turkish troops on the ground in Gaza. The resolution passed with a 13-0 vote. Russia and China abstained, expressing concern over the lack of Palestinian participation in the force and the lack of a clear role for the UN in the future of Gaza. Russia had earlier proposed its own resolution that was inspired by the U.S. draft. Russia's version requests that the UN Secretary-General be involved in identifying potential options to participate in the International Stabilization Force for Gaza. It did not mention Trump's so-called Board of Peace that would act as a transitional administration in Gaza. Hamas rejected the resolution. The group released a statement on social messaging app Telegram, saying the vote imposes an international guardianship mechanism on the Gaza Strip. Under Trump's plan, Hamas would have no role in Gaza and would be disarmed, with its personnel offered two options: either commit to coexistence or be granted safe passage out of Gaza. Hamas has repeatedly said it would give up governance, but is not willing to give up its arms. For his part, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, recently that the war has not ended, and Hamas would be disarmed. Israel focused on the disarmament of Hamas, with its UN envoy Danny Danon saying his country would demonstrate determination in ensuring that Hamas is disarmed. Off the rip, Hamas has been seeing some very popular, a spike in popularity in the aftermath of the so-called ceasefire, because they've been able to go back to basically their daily operations. You know, up to 85% of the aid trucks were getting looted previously. Since the ceasefire, they're down to 5%. Criminal gangs and looters and Israeli-backed crime syndicates are being crushed or just straight up not coming out anymore. So Hamas is the driver for peace in Gaza. Peace, safety, security, that kind of thing. And yeah, we could probably criticize to an extent, the role of policing in society. But no, we're talking about the Gaza Strip, which has just been devastated. We'll use my favorite term, obliterated again.
There is no justice system in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Hamas is doing the best that they can. And the people, even people who don't like Hamas, because there are a lot of, I don't want to say dissidents in Gaza, but there are a lot of people who aren't fans of Hamas for any number of reasons, whether it's they blame them for the genocide of the Palestinians, or they're, lifelong al-Fatah voters, or I don't know, maybe they have personal beef with someone in Hamas. Like, I'm never vote. I hate those guys. I don't know. The same kind of reasons you get anyone disliking any political party. But even amongst these guys are like, well, at the very least, Hamas has things under control.
And just as a quick pause, sorry to interrupt you, but so that right there, I know you were just voicing that just to add context for the audience, but in the in the Western propaganda system, that kind of logic, Palestinians are almost have this pressure to prove their legitimacy by being against Hamas. You know what I mean? They almost have to say they are basically people not supporting Hamas is used to delegitimize Hamas and to show that they're slaves of Hamas, whereas people in Israel, whenever someone like Alan Dershowitz is oh, we have a really vibrant society, a lot of people in Israel hate the government and they protest, and it's right, and they should, because they're free to do it. So whenever dissent in Israel is highlighted, it's to basically strengthen the regime and to say look at our democratic society. Whenever dissent in Gaza specifically is highlighted, it's to fragment it, attack it, delegitimize it, all that shit. You know what I mean? Yeah,
people in Gaza are either, as portrayed in the media, either they love Hamas and therefore, they voted for the terrorists. Right. Yeah, they're terrorists. Or, Hamas is the brutal oppressor of the Palestinian people. We have to free Palestine from Hamas. And the reality is both more nuanced and so much less complex. The Gaza Strip is filled with 2 million people who are normal people and have all varieties of opinions about what goes on in their daily lives and their relationship to their governing body. I'm sure tons of people are well, yeah,
maybe it's maybe you're a Christian in Gaza. And you're like, well, I don't like the fact that Hamas is overtly a Muslim group. I'd rather it be more secular. But I like having the streets swept, and I like not getting robbed. And
they've been economically choked since 2006.
Yeah.
So that's part of however anyone wants to frame anything, that's a fact that has to be considered.
Yeah. Hamas and the people of Gaza do not have any sort of sovereignty. They are doing the best they can in these brutal apartheid ghetto conditions. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Hamas has over and over and over again resisted radicalism is maybe not something we have to praise them for, mm-hmm. but it is something to be recognized because it's outside of what the American imperial propaganda wants us to think about them. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is not ISIS. They hate these guys, and they actually went to war with them and beat them.
Yeah.
And what's more is in that situation where these ISIS guys took over a mosque and were like, yeah, we have to, the whole thing was that Hamas was seen as not being radically Islamic enough. Mm-hmm. So they're like, we have to have like an actual Islamic revolution here and re-adhere the people to, the most extreme forms of conservative Islam you can think of. And Hamas is like, no, guys, go home. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that they did was they showed up to this mosque and they said, everybody who doesn't want to start something, mm-hmm. go home, we'll forget this ever happened. And this is exactly what they're doing now with these criminal gangs. They capture these guys like, hey man, if you didn't kill anybody, mm-hmm. if you just go home and stay out of it and pretend this never happened, so will we. Mm-hmm. They're incredibly forgiving in this sense, in ways that they're anti-punitive in a way that you would never see in America. You would never see a police officer, catch a guy involved in a criminal gang, be like, hey man, as long as you go home and keep your nose out of business, you're not going to jail, and we're not even gonna put you down as being a gang member. It would never happen here. And then, of course, everyone who at all these ISIS guys were like, no, we're gonna fight. I was like, okay, and then killed them all. So, you kind of have to at some point. So, this is who Hamas is. They're an Islamic group, and Hamas is the Islamic resistance movement. And I'm sure that rubs a few people the wrong way. But the fact is, what they do materially for the Palestinian people is broadly liked, especially in the aftermath of all of this violence that Israel committed against them. So that's the first thing. So replacing them with this new international group is not going to work.
International Stabilization Force.
Yeah, the ISF.
It's so Orwellian.
Yeah, and it's they're replacing.
And who has a better record of stabilizing Gaza?
Yeah.
than the United States and Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be with Egypt and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. As if we can trust Saudi Arabia over the UAE. Right. I'm glad to see that the Emiratis are like, actually we're not doing anything as part of this, mm-hmm. because the only time they've ever sent their military in another country, they got washed. Yemen, the Yemenis just rinsed them out of the country. I think the first 300 soldiers deployed into Yemen died the first day. Mm-hmm. So the Emiratis are probably like, well, we're not going to put any soldiers in any other countries because we know exactly what happens as soon as we do. But you can't trust Saudi Arabia to care about the Palestinian people. You can't trust the Egyptians. You can't trust the Egyptian government to care about the Palestinian people. You can't trust Turkey, pretty much unilaterally. So, and who has a good actual working relationship with the Palestinian people that this group would ostensibly be there to serve? The international armies of Indonesia, or God forbid, Azerbaijan, who just committed ethnic cleansing and is a big Israel stooge, or the actual Palestinian people who make up Hamas? Obviously, Hamas is the only reasonable solution here. And the fact that Hamas is willing to step down from power should there be
a viable alternative also shows that they're not some extreme radical group that everyone likes to pretend that they are. The one hang up here is that they refuse to disarm, and they shouldn't disarm. They should remain armed. Honestly, they should be better armed. I'm not a big fan of U.S. weapons deals, but I'd prefer to see Hamas get stuff than Israel. And, as soon as Hamas disarms, that's the end of the Palestinian people. We know that. We've seen it throughout history. In the Sovereign Shatila in the 80s in Lebanon, where as soon as the PLO disarmed, Israel and their radical Christian stooges massacred Palestinians. When the Ottoman Empire, or not the Ottoman Empire, when the Arab Revolt happened and the British disarmed the Arab people, that was a precursor for the Nakba. Hamas can't disarm because as soon as they do, Israel will use its overwhelming firepower to massacre the people. And especially if they disarm and you put the Azerbaijani military in there. So it's a fool's errand all the way through. And I'll probably wait to discuss this more when we have some of our other guests. But the fact that China straight just let this happen without protest is incredibly disappointing.
Yeah, this is kind of like this is like the take that some journalists that I like to follow, like Aaron Matei, and there's an article on Mondo Weiss, and one of the points that they're kind of like agreeing on is basically like the UN is endorsing U.S.-Israeli colonialism right now,
and they always have.
And it essentially begins as a United Nations project, and we will be speaking about this for a little while because it is an ongoing project. One of the things that stands out to me as like a historical parallel and as a pattern is the what would I call it? The fraudulent nature of like the peace plan in U.S. history, whether it's in Cuba or the Philippines or Vietnam or Iraq, or just pick examples. Whenever there's some sort of like U.S. imposed peace plan, it's not really a peace plan. It's not actually peace. It is essentially an elimination of other alternatives for development, economic development, or political development to go according to whatever kind of instability in the first place justified and invited, from the empire's perspective, U.S. intervention. The peace plan essentially solidifies and cements in the empire's perspective and the empire's vision of neocolonial domination. And what's particularly pernicious about what's happening now in Gaza is it's being lended this false facade of like international, multilateral kind of cooperation and collaboration. So it's being presented to the world as if it's a bunch of countries working together, when in fact it's essentially the internationalization of the genocide, which in a sense it was the entire time because of international complicity and economic complicity and all this stuff. But now it's like really, really being given international legitimacy. There was a report last month by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the Washington Post that essentially said that this entire time, while the Gulf states were kind of making tepid protests against Israel, they were secretly, although for some of us who are aware of this, like it's really not that secret, but there were, some secret projects, aspects of it, they were secretly collaborating with Israel to establish deeper ties, to establish deeper like security and intelligence ties, including like hiding flights and just like all this kind of stuff. And right now, there is an attempt by Trump to continue the Abraham Accords, which is essentially solidifying and strengthening the U.S. axis in the Middle East, which is dependent upon Israel, which is essentially the regional hegemon right now, as well as Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And these countries have so much money that they are trying to invest in the West. Like we did a story on EA like a couple, 2 months ago or something like that. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like there is so much transnational Western and Gulf capitalist class integration right now. Goldman Sachs, the biggest fucking banks in the world, are just like salivating, going to all these stupid fucking conferences of like investors. And the stabilisation plan that you referred to, it's been like leaking out in like the papers, and it's like a dystopian shit show. It's like, okay, we're gonna build an AI generated smart city basically on top of all these graves. We're gonna make, they have these different names, but they're basically like safe communities, which in South Vietnam we call hamlets. Hamlets were basically concentration camps. We had concentration camps in the Philippines. Gaza already fucking is a concentration camp. It's been a concentration camp. Now we're gonna concentrate the population to protect them from Hamas, and we're gonna give special privileges, which are not really gonna be any kind of decent way of life, to people who we're gonna basically try to incentivize Palestinians to detach from Hamas, which first of all, I don't think is gonna work, but itself is a sick and pernicious incentive in the first place. NATO is involved in this. It's not just the Gulf and Israel and the United States. This is like a NATO project. This is like the epitome of like development, which has such a dark history in the West and in the United States. But this is like this stupid development fantasy. It's a land grab. It's just like an orgy of investment, and it completely exposes what the plan was the entire time. It was to exterminate the people and develop the land. This actually kind of gets back to what we were talking about before with like the European notion of like if these people aren't using the land correctly. So they really have been stuck in a constant Nakba since 1948. I don't really have any good news to report on it.
Last comment I have about these American peace plans is, peace isn't the absence of war, and that's what the United States thinks peace is. Peace is when they win. But peace is the presence of justice, which if justice and the United States cannot be present at the same time. If you like the People's Report, check out our other shows at solidaritytv.org. CPUSA calls for a peace movement of a new type, November 14, 2025, via People's World. The Communist Party USA held a unique conference November 8th to strategize about how to begin building what is literally an entirely new kind of peace movement in the United States. What the party envisions, as laid out in the conference, is a movement that brings together the millions fighting for peace around the world with the millions fighting for civil rights, women's rights, immigrant rights, labor rights, environmental justice, and an end to the racism and inequality it generates. Osana Cambron, co-chair of the CPUSA, probably described best the historical need for doing this when she opened the meeting. Cambron explained that as late as 2023, when the CPUSA held an initial peace conference, the movement in the US seemed weak and divided. Many of the old anti-war groups seemed to have lost their energy. Then came the October 7th Hamas attack, followed by Israel's massive and deadly assault in Palestine. That tragedy reawakened people's sense of justice. Across the country, thousands took to the streets demanding a ceasefire and freedom for Palestinians. Cambron said the goal should be to broaden what it means to fight for peace. It's about stopping imperialist misadventures and conflict abroad, but fighting for peace also means addressing racism and the turn toward fascism in the United States. We must stand together to stop troops in our cities, deportations in our neighborhoods, and violence both overseas and at home. This is the goal of our peace conference, she declared. We believe, like Dr. Martin Luther King, that peace is more than just the end of war. It's the presence of justice. We want a movement strong enough to change U.S. foreign policy and how our tax dollars are spent. Maybe the peace movement didn't disappear. It just needed a spark to wake it up. In the months that followed the attack on Palestine, hundreds of thousands of people marched for peace, justice, and Palestinian self-determination, Cambron said in her remarks. The CPUSA Peace Conference did not fail to pinpoint the fact that the ultimate cause of war is the capitalist system itself. As Marxist-Leninists, we understand that capitalism itself drives war, Cambron said. The pursuit of profit, the constant push for new markets, cheaper labor, and control over resources, creates a system that feeds on conflict. The conference also grappled seriously with current conflicts around the world. We are clear that the attacks on Venezuela are not really about fighting cartels or doing anything that benefits working people. It is about gaining access to their oil and other resources for more profits, Cambron explained. It was clear, even from the way things were put by party leaders, that the CPUSA is grappling with the question of how to best pursue its aim of broadening the peace movement. It is inviting all of its members and allies to participate in making such decisions. I mean, we basically already touched on this, but the CPUSA is 100% correct when they say that the instigator of war is capital. Now, I mean, yeah, throughout all of history, it's been more than just capital, or capitalism and imperialism. But these material drivers of war are, in our capitalistic society, all come from capital. The military-industrial complex is the big driver. They get so much money from war. And we've known about this basically forever. Probably if you paid attention to the economic system of the Civil War. But, Smedley Butler's War is a Racket, published shortly after the conclusion of the First World War, in which he saw how much profit was being made on the First World War when he was Quartermaster General for the United States Army. And all of this, our war machine is built around the continuation of capital, whether it's driving the indigenous people out of their land in order to create more land for land use, we already discussed that, to obliterating, there I go again, to obliterating tons of, it's a good word.
It is a good word.
Tons of Central and South American countries, knocking them off for the United Fruit Company, which is now Chiquita Banana, and stuff like that. As Smedley Butler says, he knocked over half a dozen states for fruit business interests. And what did he say? He was a gangster of capital. And he could have taught Al Capone a few tricks, because Al Capone worked in 3 districts, while Smedley Butler with the United States Marines worked on 3 continents. So, all of these, our imperialist war efforts are about capital and driving wealth for the few. And of course, imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. And we have to constantly, compete with each other and then compete with and control what already exists once all new lands have been taken. So in order to open up new markets, you have to force new markets. So, they're 100% right on that. And I think that's something that's missing and has been missing from a lot of peace movements before. I mean, not to be critical of the Palestine movements here in the United States and abroad, but if you're standing up for Palestine and your understanding is not based on, your understanding of the struggle is not based on the class struggle, is not based on global capital, is not based on the material conditions and our economic output, you're going to get some things wrong and you're going to miss the picture. It's how you end up with the vote blue no matter who liberals, because their ideas of what is and isn't, driving war and driving the problems in this country are not based on the understanding of capital and imperialism, rather understanding how they, or securing how they benefit from it. So,
a really good book, if anyone's interested, is The Great Evasion by William Appleman Williams. He was a historian of U.S. foreign policy, really U.S. empire. And I mean, in like 1955, he was considered a radical. Like the U.S. history establishment basically tried to completely excommunicate him. He had some sort of vague Communist Party ties because of like political activism for civil rights and all this kind of stuff. So they were like, he's a communist, piece of shit, Arthur Schlesinger, Kennedy administration advisor and Cold War liberal cuck, is basically like the total opposite of this guy. Anyway, William Appleman Williams, who wrote a book called The Great Evasion, and The Great Evasion is the avoidance of Marxism in the United States, in American academia. And he specifically says, not only have we avoided it systematically, the study of Marx, but we do it to our own detriment, because actually, if you look at the ideas of Karl Marx, and this is in Williams' book, The Great Evasion, it almost perfectly explains US foreign policy, and he kind of goes through it and looks at like unequal geographic development and the ideas that Marx kind of wrote about. Even though Marx never developed a systematic theory of imperialism and colonialism, he has like fragments and ideas which are pretty interesting that Williams compiles and applies to US foreign policy. So yeah, going off of what the Communist Party said, there's a lot of scholarship out there, including Williams' book, The Great Evasion, that's worth checking out.
My last comment is a slight criticism. I'm surprised that these guys had to come up with a whole new thing to start discussing the intersectionality, I guess, if you will. Like, oh, peace has to include not just anti-war, but also anti-racism. Like, really? It's 2025. You're just coming to that conclusion? Pretty sure the Black Panthers had that figured out in the 70s, and even by that metric, they were late to the party. You know, we've known this for a good long time, but I don't know. Maybe that's just my a poor reading of the article. But
it's a decent point. Yeah.
Hey, comrade, in Mean Alive, you joined our Patreon at solidaritytelevision.org. How a Maryland prisoner died an excruciating death from dehydration. October 23, 2025, via the Baltimore Banner. Lamont Mealy endured 8 days without water before his death, according to his family's attorneys, who say state prison officials tried to cover it up. Correctional staff at a Western Maryland prison shut off the water to a mentally ill man's cell, then allowed him to suffer for 8 days before he finally died of dehydration, according to a lawsuit. On July 5, 2023, an officer working at Western Correctional Institution noted in a logbook that Lamont Mealy, housed in an isolation cell without even toiletries, appeared to need help, according to the filings in Baltimore County Circuit Court. The officer later told investigators that Mealy looked dazed and was unresponsive at the time. He notified a surgeon, who did not get medical attention for Mealy, even though an IV at that point would have saved his life, the filing said. Hours later, Mealy, 52, was dead. The medical examiner's office concluded that the cause of death was dehydration. Per report, Mr. Mealy had a history of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, the medical examiner's report said. He was found in a single prison cell with fecal matter in and around his mouth. The medical examiner's office ruled the manner of death as an accident. There are no signs of significant trauma, and the toxicology report for drugs and alcohol is negative. Many of the details of the events leading up to what the lawsuit described as Mealy's slow and excruciatingly painful death were drawn from letters written by a fellow prisoner whose house nearby, Danny Hoskins. Hoskins filed complaints and wrote letters, claiming that Mealy spent a week suffering in an isolation cell with no access to water, at times taunted by correctional officers. The first complaint prompted correctional officers to come to Hoskins' cell and beat him, he wrote, before he was transferred to another prison. He then sent letters to the governor, the attorney general, and Carolyn Scruggs, secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. For years, Western Correctional Institution has gotten away with murders, beatings, and pepper spraying of the black inmates over and over again, Hoskins wrote to the governor in a letter obtained by a legal team representing a member of Mealy's family. By the way, I'm a white man who has risked my life in this. What will you risk? The Corrections Department investigated Hoskins' claims and disputed parts of his account. Attorney Carrie Hansel, representing the family member, is arguing in a public records lawsuit related to the case that the relative is entitled to a discovery. He wrote in a filing that the corrections secretary and her top lawyer were both made aware of the death, but covered it up and did not disclose any of the wrongdoing to Mr. Mealy's family. The Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, the attorney wrote, then stonewalled the family's public records request until they filed the lawsuit, and engaged in an obvious and unlawful effort to hide the most incriminating evidence of what was done to Mr. Mealy. In response to questions about the lawsuit, Department spokesperson Keith Martucci said, while the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services is unable to comment on matters involving pending litigation, the health and safety of those DPSCS is responsible for, as well as facility personnel, remains the department's foremost priority.
So every now and then you'll talk to, if you're lucky, an anti-communist. You'll have a really, really fun discussion with them. And they'll probably bring up the Gulag as a kind of point of propaganda. Well, it's stories like these, and not just the disturbing, like hard to read details of the one in particular, but it's the, again, being desensitized to the institutionalized violence of American society. It's the banality of these stories and how common they are that I think turns the like Cold War, like, dude, it's, you know, the Gulag in the United States is still in operation. Yeah. And it is central to the capital accumulation process. It's central to the labor discipline process. It's central to the maintenance of a race hierarchy, all this stuff. It's so fucked up that this is just part of local, you know, prison operations. You know, how common these stories are. Yeah, so I don't know. That's my initial take on it.
I mean, the maximum. Do you know what the maximum prison sentence you could get in the Soviet Gulag was?
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. So any time a prison sentence is handed out in America that's longer than 10 years, it's worse than any punishment you could get in the Soviet Union. So, but the details of this are horrific. You know, the corrections officers, the prison guards, the torturers, just went in and shut off this guy's water. That's it. And then when the other prisoners complained that, hey man, you shut off this guy's water, he's dying in there, they beat the shit out of them and then sent them to another prison so they couldn't complain. And there's no oversight. No one cares. No one cares about prisoners or their conditions. Most people have a very strongly favor punitive justice, where if someone does something wrong, they get punished for it. And if that punishment results in their death, you know, probably most people don't like that. But there's a bunch of people, enough people are comfortable with it that they don't complain when it happens. Rather than focusing our society on rehabilitation, on correcting problems in society that lead to or inspire or reward criminal behavior, the prisons themselves are a capitalist enterprise to generate profit. I mean, the fact that for-profit prisons exist in the first place has never made sense to me. Like, it's just so obviously a breach of, you know, civil service to have a profit motive for imprisoning people. So, you know, the fact that you can just murder, and it's often people of color, disproportionately high. I mean, you can find prisons on maps of U.S. demographics when you sort by race, because anywhere where there's an incredibly dense pocket of people of color is a federal prison. So, see out in the boonies, oh, suddenly there's 100 black people who live in this very small community? Yeah, it's a prison. And, you know, it's, like you said, it's all about supporting the racial hierarchy of America, of white America, protecting white American interests, criminalizing being black, and punishing that with execution. Because if we're honest with ourselves, This gentleman didn't just die in prison, he was executed. He was killed by the state. It was straight up murder. So the prison industrial complex is a bane on justice in America. And I know Frankie would definitely have so much more to say about this, the prison abolition. And the fact that you can put someone in solitary without water, and then it just gets covered up and no one does anything about it, is and should be terrifying. I mean, and it certainly is to people of color who know that for no reason at all, that could be them or their family.
So, yes, ditto to that. So this is, let's see what year this is from. This is from 2020, so this is 5 years old. It's from the Harvard Civil Rights, Civil Liberties Law Review. It's called the Treatment Industrial Complex, Alternative Corrections, Private Prison Companies, and Criminal Justice Debt. Quote, of the 6.7 million adults involved in the criminal legal system, approximately 4.5 million people, almost 2/3, are under correctional control outside of jails or prisons. So it's not just literally people being in the prison system, but it's basically keeping them stuck in this supervised, controlled, managed, coercive, punitive lifestyle that extracts money from them in this shitty way. For the majority of these people. So it's not just people behind bars, it's people kind of like being behind invisible bars, which limits their movement and their freedom and their choices and all that shit, including limiting their ability to even be rehabilitated in a meaningful way once they're outside of these bars. So you made me think of that. I wanted to pull that up.
Yeah, and going back to the Gulag argument, 1 in 4 prisoners in the world are American. Full 25% of all imprisoned people in the world are in America.
And we're like 5% of the world population.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So
25% of the fucking prisoners.
Yeah. Astronomical levels of imprisonment, and then it inevitably leads to huge civil rights abuses, especially for people of color in these prisons. Because you don't sign up to be a prison guard because you're a decent guy. It's like becoming a police officer or joining Blackwater, right? Like I don't sympathize with, but I can understand people who join the military or join the police with good intentions because they're ignorant and they don't know any better. Nobody signs up to be a prison guard with good intentions. No one thinks, well, I'm going to really make a difference here in fucking prison. They join for money or power or because they want to be involved in law enforcement and they don't want to be on the beat anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These aren't good people. And oftentimes they are racist, abusive people who encourage and support racist gangs in prisons. And they exist to terrorize and control predominantly black and brown people, but poor people in general. You never see rich people going to jail.
So my own career path, I work in addiction treatment. It overlaps with, the criminal justice system. People are often mandated to, be with us. And it's really frustrating because I have to come up against the limits of existing resources and support for people who are in really, really rough places. And I read something recently that I'm also thinking of, and this is a critique of biomedical reductionism, which in a nutshell says every single problem can be reduced to something in your brain that we're going to treat with some kind of physical intervention. I'm not denying the reality of like medicine and shit like that, but we have to look at the social thing. So this is a pretty cool quote. It says, this is from The Phenomenon of Care by Patricia Benner, who's like a clinical care philosopher. She says, modernist medicine has separated the social from the physical and is focused upon diseases that can be treated or cured with biomedical interventions. The project of separation of the social from the medical, an initial condition for the secular development of medicine, has been sustained in part by the many successes of biomedical cures, blah, blah, blah. But paradoxically, the more successful biomedicine becomes in treating disease, while ignoring the personal and social aspects of health and illness, the more the shadow world of everyday care, ontological structures and specific traditions and styles of caregiving, manifest themselves. Medicine can only accomplish its work if these world-sustaining care structures are reasonably intact. While this is patently obvious, healthcare policy and the economic and institutional structures for biomedicine are geared to provide expensive treatments with little attention given to caregiving structures that sustain and or prevent the need for medical treatment. So basically, no matter how much like a president or a fucking billboard on like 80, wherever we are, highway, is like, we have a fucking x-ray machine, like all that shit. It's like, it doesn't matter if people can't save money, if people can't survive some kind of crisis, which with the capitalist system, you're gonna have crises. If people can't afford food, if people have to work 3 jobs and they're a single mother, all that kind of shit, because, and there's a term, it's literally called lifestyle medicine. That's like a hot topic right now. It's like literally, it's not just like fucking like your blood or your veins or your brain. It's like how you live, like what you choose to do. And like, it's your responsibility. It's my responsibility to exercise. It's my responsibility to blah, 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 all that stuff, right? But also, realistically, I'm shaped by the material conditions around me, right? So the lifestyle that I have and the health and medicine that I'm able to have access to is circumscribed by our economic system. Anyway, when people get out of prison and they're in that punitive shit for like, drug court and all this other stuff, oh man, it is so restricting, and it so restricts their choices, and it makes it really, really hard for them to develop a lifestyle that is conducive to their well-being. So prison reform, prison abolition, addiction treatment, it's so dependent upon the underlying sociology of capitalism, and that too is the foundation of like fixing healthcare and medicine. Mm-hmm. People are going to be sick. Even like, it's not just like, oh, we have cheaper drug prices. Like, thanks Biden. You know what I mean? Like, we need fucking food, and we need like an economy that's actually like based in people rather than capital. Yeah. Anyway, that's my rant.
Crime is the child of poverty, and if you refuse to address poverty, and if you exacerbate it through redlining, through discrimination, or just through everything America does to exploit the working class and for the enrichment of the few, you're going to create poverty. And there's a huge racial element to it too that we've covered. But like you said, the lifestyle medicine we could call it lifestyle treatment for crime prevention. If we wanted to prevent crime, we would do it by preventing or alleviating the pains of poverty, just like how much substance abuse is to treat the pains of poverty. That's what it boils down to, is that crime and criminality is an affliction given to the working class, and especially to people of color.
Well, the kind of crime that we're told to focus on.
Yeah.
If we focus on the real criminals.
Yeah. I mean, wage theft is the biggest theft in America by a huge proportion, that no one ever goes to jail for that.
Right.
I steal $20 from a gas station, going in the slammer for life or whatever. So, as the rap group Body Count says in their song, No Lives Matter, black and brown skin has always stood for poor, and they're profiling. It comes down to poverty is what is being criminalized, and so poor people go to jail. And when it comes to the poor, no lives matter. Hey, did you know that the People's Report is produced both as an audio and a video program? Stay informed by following us on either YouTube or anywhere podcasts are released.
Riding the AI Bubble, November 15, 2025, via Economic and Political Weekly. For some time now, the hype around artificial intelligence, AI, has driven an explosive increase in the market capitalization of firms operating the AI space. Late in October, NVIDIA, which provides the advanced chips that power AI development, became the world's first $5 trillion company. That is surprising since its valuation stood at $4 trillion 3 months earlier and $400 billion 3 years earlier, when ChatGPT was first announced. The boom does not end with AI, but pervades firms in the tech space with very different connections to the evolution of AI. Firms like Apple and Microsoft that have bought into AI through investments in market leader OpenAI or in AI infrastructure like cloud computing and data centers have found their valuations exploding as well, touching $4 trillion or more, as has Oracle, which provides cloud computing services. There is evidence that a substantial part of the investment driving this boom is also borrowed. The frenzy on the part of financial investors has been fueled by the decision of firms in the AI space to undertake huge investments in pursuit of the AI dream. Alphabet, Amazon, Google, and Meta have together spent an estimated $112 billion on chips and data centers in this quarter ending September 2025 alone. There is, however, much cause for skepticism. The record on the benefits of AI use, even where visible, is still way short of revolutionary, and in some instances, those benefits are yet to be seen. High investments means the depreciation costs to be covered in the future would be high, necessitating high prices to support the required earnings from sales to users, besides related advertising. But competition from much cheaper and equally effective alternatives like DeepSeek could prevent such pricing strategies, and the product range required to deliver higher earnings is yet to unfold. In the event of the unbridled spending of these firms has not been encouraged just by hugely optimistic estimates of the future of AI, but by the large volumes of still cheap liquidity available in the system because of the easy money policies of the central banks and the liberalized financial system, which has seen non-bank financial players, such as private equity and credit firms, mobilizing that liquidity and deploying it for profit. It is now becoming clear that a disproportionate share of such funds is being directed to AI and AI-related firms. Over the first week of November, there were strong signs that the boom may be unwinding. Firms riding on the AI boom lost market value of around $1 trillion over just that week. 8 of the most valuable AI tech-related firms, such as NVIDIA, Meta, and Oracle, lost as much as $800 billion in market value. Even NVIDIA, which had quite recently broken the $5 trillion valuation record, lost around $350 billion. If the trend continues, the US and the world could be looking at another financial crisis, which have external effects on the real economy that could be as damaging as 2008 and after. In fact, if this is the beginning of the next financial collapse, things look worse than they did in 2008. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet is so bloated that it would be hard-pressed to inject as much cheap liquidity into the system to save financial and non-financial firms as it did last time. And the elasticity of the spending power of the U.S. Treasury is also likely to be limited by the political standoff and divide that has led to the prolonged shutdown of the U.S. government. With the capacity to bail out firms and the economy thus restricted, stalling the downturn would be difficult. But then, those governing capitalism never learned enough from history to prevent these periodic collapses. This time, that era could precipitate a crisis as bad as it was in the 1930s. I'm pretty sure that either as of today or maybe yesterday, Peter Thiel, billionaire, worthless guy, who I think was also implicated in the Epstein files, started dumping his NVIDIA stock. So in expectation of the pop of the AI bubble. So we're looking at, as the article says, a potentially catastrophic financial collapse like we saw in 2008 at best, 1930 at worst. And so we just got to see what happens. And on one hand, kind of hope that it bursts. I'm sick and tired of AI bullshit everywhere, all the time. Can't get around it. A friend of mine works in an art field and was just told by their boss that they can't go out and do an actual product photo shoot anymore because they would have to go on location and get photographers and set design and whatnot. They're just going to do AI. So imagine being an artist and being told, actually, we're going to cancel all the art stuff. Go play on your computer and do something with AI until we get what we want. And it's so heartless, so lifeless, and AI art sucks and it looks bad. But
art.
Yeah.
Official intelligence.
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
I was trying to explore that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. The economy gets boring without a good bubble burst every now and then, you know? Yeah. So, like, capitalism is so deeply financialized and dependent upon, like, you know, information flows that even if we have a catastrophic, I think, even if we have like a catastrophic 1930s style economic crisis and collapse and depression, I don't think that that would, because I mean, look at what happened after 2008. We get, in a nutshell, more neoliberalism, more concentration of banks, more financialization, more datafication, more surveillance, et cetera. So basically like the underlying like technological substrate of capitalism, if you will, gets more deeply entrenched into humanity. So I'm always thinking about it from that perspective. It's like AI is AI, but deeper than AI is sometimes called surveillance capitalism, data capitalism, and of course financialism and all that stuff underneath it. So this is more of a surface level story. It doesn't mean it's insignificant because there's so much money in it. $5 trillion valuations, like that's insane, that's stupid. You bringing up the cultural aspects of AI is important because it is becoming ubiquitous. And there's a world where like it could be a helpful tool, and I think it could, like theoretically, any kind of technology be neutral. The problem is that like, I don't know, probably just about every technology in history has the possibility of being usurped by an elite and used for domination rather than like liberation and creativity and play and all these kinds of things. Yeah, it's fucking stupid.
Yeah. And you know, the fact that the government bailout of the banks in 2008 is one thing, but the fact that that's not even going to be an option this time around, presumably, I don't want to say it has me scared. If anything, I think that it's going to open up an opportunity for more people to realize the ever-growing contradictions within society and how socialism is going to be the only real solution to that. Because under socialism, you don't have, you know, venture capitalists, you don't have these billionaires to begin with, and you don't have this speculation and speculative finance that, you know, booms and busts. And of course, you know, when these bubbles grow, whenever the financial stock market is doing great or whatever, all this trade is happening, I don't benefit from that. The minute it busts, I get screwed. You know who doesn't get screwed is...
Right, the people who did benefit from it.
Yeah.
Total contradiction.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how come I, who are never going to benefit from, you know, NVIDIA stock or AI boom, why do I have to pay for those who will? And why should I have to bear the punishment too for them hoping that this is going to be worth a lot of money that only they get to have, and then when it isn't, that they have to pay it back?
Yeah, it's not right.
The integration of AI into everything too, in order to recoup the, you know, expense, just going to skyrocket prices. So
That's, yeah, I mean, that is one of the inherently totalitarian aspects of capitalist technology, or the capitalist corruption of technology, is like, you can't just have a technology, it needs to become total. It needs to become totalizing. It needs to go everywhere. Like the logic of like economies of scale. We're only going to make money if we fucking make this much and make people want this much, and it's like not sustainable. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the fucking environment. All that stuff. Ugh. Like try something out first, and then you know, and see if it's worth it. That's just the logic of capitalist technology.
yeah, it's this isn't the first time we've gone through this speculation stuff over, you know, relatively
foolish things. I mean, just look up the tulip crisis of the 1600s with the tulip speculation. Yeah, that's a real thing. Just as silly as having computers. And the AI programs themselves, again, aren't good. Like the article says, it's new, but it's not revolutionary technology. It doesn't do anything helpful at the moment. You know, it teaches kids how to find knives and says sexually exploitative stuff to them out of teddy bears and shit. Right? Generates really crappy images.
Makes shit up.
Yeah.
A lot of it's made up, false information.
Yeah. It's a guessing machine, and generally speaking, it's a pretty decently designed one, but it's still a guessing machine. And they're using them to, use drones to bomb people in Palestine.
Yeah.
Or to track criminals and respond to them here in the United States.
I'm worried about, I have a friend who's like a doctor, and he's like, yeah, I mean, we use it for like dictation. We'll kind of like describe a session, and it'll kind of like turn it into like a formal note process, which I'm like, okay, that's relatively innocuous. But I'm worried for it being used like diagnostically, like literally like taking the human element out of it and being, especially for like therapy, like that's so sick.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that the AI can actually be pretty good for diagnostics for things like scanning, X-rays, and whatnot, being able to pick up stuff that maybe the human eye wouldn't.
Right.
But again,
No, I mean more like mental health diagnostics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just going to tell everyone that they have autism and
Right.
ADHD.
Yeah.
And cancer.
Oh my God, no, like seriously, this is gonna make me sound like a conspiracy theorist or some shit, but what if like Pfizer or someone starts investing in AI to try and get them to like diagnose people and make them require like medications or something?
Don't give them any ideas.
Yeah, erase that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I just put that out into the atmosphere. It's gonna manifest now. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But yeah, I think that the dictation thing for medicine, I've heard that from doctors. They're like, this is one of the greatest things. It just cuts down so much time and paperwork. I'd much rather have a doctor spends less time in the office and is less stressed and busy all the time working on patients. But and I have to assume that most of the time they go back to they're probably supposed to go back and double check to make sure it doesn't make any errors.
Yeah.
But the stuff that people, I mean, what did I read? 5 million users daily are discussing suicide with ChatGPT. Like a ridiculous amount of people. And the guessing machine that tries to guess not just facts, but tries to guess what you want to hear most is really, really bad. I mean, many people have killed themselves after conversations with it. And like, on one hand, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't have gotten fooled by a computer. But obviously the kind of people who are going to be going to ChatGPT or whatever for mental health help are people who can't get it through their communities or through doctors, etc. So, and the things that it instructs people to do, I saw a video recently where a guy basically just tried to follow everything that ChatGPT was telling him, just to see, like, just to document how crazy this stuff was.
Yeah.
And it'd be almost entertaining if it wasn't also so resource exploitative.
Yeah, I mean, as is often the case, sometimes the object of our attention or the object of our analysis is not always the cause of whatever we're feeling or talking about or confused about. So I don't see AI as like the source or the cause or whatever. Like from like a collective, like spiritual perspective, it's really interesting that, like, for example, if we were to introduce, AI or just a phone to like a medieval person, they'd be like, what is this mirror? You know what I mean? And like, that's kind of what it is in a way. It's like, what are we doing collectively right now? It's a mirror, but it's like, we want it to do the looking for us kind of a thing. You know what I mean? So we're just going to become less human. Like, dude, literally WALL-E. Fucking prophetic film. Like, you know what I mean? It's just going to take all these aspects that make us human beings which we're already struggling with the dehumanization process of capitalism itself and industrialism and all the fucking hierarchies that are older than capitalism and all that shit. But still, now to like put it onto hyperspeed and to make it more exponentially dehumanizing is just something else that we're gonna have to grapple with to like get connection. There was something in New York Times Magazine about like there was like the ethicist, like, is it wrong if you literally are in a romantic relationship with an AI bot? And it's like, hey, I love being a contrarian and saying like, you know, let's look at it from this perspective. But yeah, I would say that that is wrong. Like, I think that that's wrong if you're in a romantic relationship with like an AI entity. Yeah. Not even like if I see someone over there, I'm not going to be like, you're a piece of shit. Because like, you know what I mean? But like collectively, that this is where we're at.
It's alienation.
It's alienation, exactly.
It's replacing a human relationship with a corporate machine that's probably going to have to start charging people. And you know, it's dehumanization, like you said, of ourselves, and it's alienation and whatnot. And it's just, I don't know how best to put it, but you know, yeah, people are using it to, it's like people who have chronic pain and end up on heroin. These are the kind of people who are relying on this. You know, it's not great to be a heroin addict, but these people didn't start with heroin. They started with marijuana. No, they started with chronic pain. They started with pain that they can't.
Dude, there are so many people that I know that are, you know, like recovered addicts that they were like, I was given a prescription. That's just the beginning of so many people's stories. Yeah.
So people who are using ChatGPT or any of the other ones to fill that void of human connection. What's wrong isn't that they're using ChatGPT. It's a problem. But what's wrong is that they have been alienated from themselves, from their community, from their work, from their friends, their neighbors, their family, from having loved ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the problem is that it's a substitute, and that the only reason why it's a substitute is because the true thing, whatever you want to call it, connection and purpose and existential fulfillment and all that, that's lacking. There's a vacuum.
And it's been stolen by the same people who are now doing all the investment in AI, because the capitalists have alienated us from each other.
Privatizing the public sphere.
Yeah.
Making it unaffordable, all that stuff.
Yeah, the destruction of third spaces and whatnot. I mean, the end of the sidewalk ballet, the confining everyone to cars. I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's all, no, but you're right. Like, it's all interconnected.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this week's episode of The People's Report. Don't forget to subscribe at solidaritytelevision.org. Organizing the working classes of the world, and solidarity forever.